have just a couple more weeks, of course, before everything ends. And so today, speaking about everything ending, what we are going to start with is basically a research strategy checklist. We've gone through all of the different components, the different areas, and now we want to take a step back and look at the bigger picture and think about how we put this all together. And one of your handouts that hopefully you are picking up or have picked up is a research strategy checklist. Then after that, what we will do is go over the exam. I have been promising you all semester that I would explain it. Well, today is the day I keep that promise. And then we'll take a break and come back and take a look at some web-based research and some web-based tips and tricks. Before we dive in, however, after looking at assignment 4, there are a couple of areas of confusion that occurred for a number of people that I want to clarify. First, and actually quite important, has to do, of course, with updating, and that is a number of people, when looking at Lexis and looking at Shepard's, see here it says no subsequent appellate history. And they think, oh, good, I'm set. There's no subsequent, thinking that that means no subsequent history, so my case is still good law. But as you can see, the example I pulled up, Plessy versus Ferguson, is most certainly not good law, as we all know. Of course, we get that signal from the red stop sign here and here. What this means, and you'll see this in many cases, is it's not that there's no subsequent history, it's that there's no subsequent appellate history for this particular litigation. And by that I mean the parties, Plessy and Ferguson, whomever they were, did not take this matter any further. Sometimes cases go to higher courts or get remanded back to the lower court, and then the lower court issues a decision. Any number of ways where appellate history for the actual controversy, the actual litigation might occur, is what this is referring to. This is not referring to subsequent unrelated litigation by total other parties where the court looks back and says, hey, wait a minute, that earlier case from somebody else no longer applies, or that other case still applies. That's something totally different, and that's the precedential value that we talk about when we talk about cases, and looking back in prior cases that have nothing to do with the litigation that's going on now. So don't get confused by that. I can certainly understand why you might have been, unless you think about it and understand all the terminology, that can be very misleading. In fact, next time I see our Lexis rep, I'm going to mention that caused some confusion amongst some of you, and I happen to think that confusion was quite justified. So please don't get confused about that. The other aspect where a few people were confused, and honestly I think less significant but still worth talking about, has to do with headnotes on Westlaw. And I've noticed this for some state cases. I honestly don't know if it's just New York. I suspect that it's other states as well. Tends not to be federal, but I'm not going to swear to that, and that is having to do with looking for headnotes and key numbers, and it depends actually on whether you use the official citation, so the state citation, in this case in New York it's the AD 2nd Appellate Division, or you use the unofficial citation, NYS New York Sup. So I pulled this particular case up using the official, the AD 2nd, and we get actually headnotes from that publication. We don't get the key numbers. This is actually that particular publication's attempt at headnotes. Actually, you typically won't even see that. If you put an AD 2nd or a MISC or another state reporter citation, sometimes you won't get any key numbers at all. If, however, you go to the same exact case in the unofficial, which is the West publication, so that's West published and, well, just West published, that's when you, so this is the same case, the opinion's the same, but here you see our familiar West headnotes. So if you can remember, if you're not seeing the headnotes, make sure that you pull it up using the West citation, which is the unofficial citation. New York's up the regional, Atlantic, Northeastern, California Reporter, trying to think some of the others. Everybody clear on that? I see some furrowed brows. Speak up if you have a question. And again, I should have stopped too. And more importantly, you want to be clear on what this means and doesn't mean. Everybody good on that? Okay, so let's dive into some research strategy. I gave you the print handout so you can follow it along if you so choose. Hopefully will. But you will also find this, if you happen to lose the print, this is now also on the handout portion of the website. Okay, so putting it all together. You will rarely do all of these steps that we're about to talk about. This is just to give you a review of what we've talked about overall. You will typically do some of them depending on your issue. You may only do a couple. If your issue is more complex and you need to go more depth, you may do more. But don't think I have to do every single one of them. For instance, legislative history, most of the time, a vast majority of the time, you won't have to deal with. Some of you in some of your analyses threw in legislative history because we covered it in class, and so you felt you should mention it, and that's okay. But from a research strategy standpoint, legislative history is not something you're going to have to research unless you have some reason to think, I need to know what the legislature thought about this particular provision, this particular language, these particular terms when they were considering the legislation. Okay. And I would emphasize, as you can see on the top, ask questions. I can't tell you, so many people, when you're starting a new job especially, you don't want to look like you don't know what you're doing, right? You want to make a good impression. I totally understand that. But especially if you're in a larger organization and you have someone who works in the library who can help you with research, or again, as I keep on saying, feel free to give us a call. But if you are confused, ask questions. Sometimes people will know about resources either in your organization or just that exist generally that you're new, you would have no reason to know about. So that is one of your best tools is other human beings. But starting in the process officially, as we did in the semester, a client walks in your door, always a good thing, analyze the facts and formulate your questions. We did what I call issue spotting. Whether you think that's technically correct or not, it doesn't, whichever way is fine. You might think of it as term generation, whatever works for you, but you want to think about those facts. Remember, I gave you the facts of our client with her heart problem, who wanted to sue her HMO, and one thing that we never quite worked out is what the whole process was in the HMO reviewing her claim. And we discovered as we did research in those secondary sources that, hey, wait a minute, maybe if they applied the rules, if whoever reviewed her claim somehow didn't keep to the industry standards, maybe we have a negligence claim. And I never answered that question for you factually, intentionally, because I wanted to highlight for you the importance of analyzing your facts. Think about your questions, formulate the questions. We didn't even know that preemption was something we had to worry about till we did a little research, and then we found out, wow, that's a whole nother major question that we have to research and figure out. And so this continuous refining of questions goes throughout the research process. Like we discovered, maybe negligence in how the HMO made its decision could be a claim. Maybe there's maybe there's intentional infliction of emotional distress. Kind of, we don't think so, but as we do our research, we might come up with other ways, other theories of how we can achieve our client's end. Of course, think about what jurisdiction you're in. Is this a federal question? In our particular situation, it was both, so we had to look at both federal and state materials. Again, this is a more complex question. Frequently, it really will only be just a state or maybe just a federal question. Are there procedural aspects? We talked a little bit about statute of limitations. Part of our issue was preemption. So that was a state and federal question as well. Be flexible in your terminology choice. I noticed in some of the assignments, even in the last one I've seen so far, the CASES assignment, people like to use the term misbranding. Now we're talking about our assignment issue of the T product. Yes, New York State used the term misbranding, but if you stuck to that term, that's a pretty limiting, pretty specific limiting term, and maybe they don't use that term in the regulations. Maybe, again, because our assignment issue is both federal and state, New York State uses misbranding, but that may throw off your research if you try to use it in the CFR, because the CFR may not use the term misbranding. So be flexible, take out terms, put in terms. Okay, so that's our analyzing facts, what I call issue spotting, term generation, however you like to phrase it. So now we want to talk about background. We looked at those wonderful secondary sources to learn about some of the questions we have to ask. Where do you want to start your research? To start to learn what some of those terms are, to figure out that you have to worry about preemption for our client in suing the HMO. Where you start is going to depend on what you already know. If you don't know much of anything, then maybe you want to start an encyclopedia that's pretty broad, pretty general, not very in-depth, but at least will get you started, just like ALR got us started and gave us that wonderful article which clued us into, hey, wait a minute, we have this whole preemption thing we have to worry about. Remember research guides. Research guides, someone sat down and if it's on your topic, has got started for you. As I mentioned, legal encyclopedias, even legal dictionaries. We looked at ALR. I suggest you may want to look at an index. I say print here, but it could be an online index too. Just lately, indexes are appearing more and more online. I think the online services are realizing, hey, people find these useful. If you have a hard time figuring out what terms to even put in, do your best guess for the first term and take a look at an index. Sometimes the index prepared by an intelligent human being will give you a sense of what the good terminology might be, what the terms of art for your area might be, if there are any. And yes, starting in Google is totally fine. Wikipedia even also. Totally fine. Just don't stop there. I know several of you extol the virtues of Google, and I'm with you. Believe me, I am with you. But if you stop there, if you think, Google will take care of it all, you risk missing some of the more subtle and complex areas. Google might show you the way to preemption. If you type in liability HMO or spell it out a little bit more, Google probably isn't going to get to the theory of, or the idea of investigating the theory of negligence on the HMO administrator's part. Google isn't going to get you into those finer points. It's not going to explain to you how they relate, it's probably not going to give you a great sense of how preemption. Maybe it'll get you to a law review article that does, maybe not. So again, Google's great to start with, great to give you a start with the terminology, with some resources, even with some primary resources. Just don't stop there. And when you are Googling, looking at a particular website, just as we saw, think about how reliable this website is. A couple of you reference, oh, hey, Google led me to this particular law firm site. Well, that might be fine, but maybe that law firm is they're full of excellent attorneys, or maybe that law firm are attorneys who maybe don't have as great an understanding as you need. Remember also, those law firm sites are commercial entities trying to get clients, so they may not be as focused on spelling out the nuances, and they're more focused on attracting clients. So again, be very aware of what you're looking at, and of course, how current it is. Maybe it is a fantastic law firm, but maybe the person who created whatever you're looking at left the firm 10 years ago. If you're not looking at that thinking, how old is this? You may be citing or relying on 10-year-old law, which may or may not be out of date. So once you have refined your issues and got a little bit of knowledge, either with ALR like we did with our ERISA and preemption question, then maybe look at some more in-depth sources. Now, I'm suggesting a particular path for looking at secondary sources. I'm suggesting starting with Google and more general encyclopedias and going to treatises. There is no one right way. Again, it depends where you start. Maybe you know a little bit about the area and you know, hey, wait a minute, this is copyright, forget this, I'm going to NIMR. We all know NIMR on copyright is a great treatise. Or I'm practicing in the tax area and I know RIA checkpoint. And I'm familiar with that, I'm just going to go straight there. So I'm not telling you don't go to something more specialized initially. I'm just suggesting what might work for when you don't know very much about a particular issue. So in that case, again, treatises. Again, remember research guides is a place to find treatises, other references. Many of you are fans of law reviews, and I'm with you 100% on there. Law reviews articles can give you great explanation, can give you references if the author is relying on other sources. Remember the index to legal periodicals if your full text search isn't working out. Practice guides. You just looked at practice guides for this last assignment that you just finished. Something like American Jurisprudence Proof of Facts. We actually just saw that in the very beginning. I'm not sure if you remember. And it turns out there was a great article that not only gave us some practice features like forms, like checklists, but also gave us a great explanation. And then, of course, loose leaf services, which are more and more migrating online and just migrating online as their own independent database. RIA Checkpoint, the tax database is an example. CCH and Teleconnect that we looked at a couple of times is another example. Just bear in mind when you are using Lexis and Westlaw for secondary sources, some of these secondary sources can be extraordinarily expensive. Again, it depends on where you're working, and one of the best tips I can give you for practicing is find out what the rules are when you get there if you're working with Lexis and Westlaw. Find out what secondary sources you do or don't have, what primary sources you do and don't have. Probably you'll have whatever state you're in, but you may not have other states. So just be aware. But again, Lexis and what I started with, Lexis and Westlaw for secondary sources can be very expensive. If you want to look at NIMR on Lexis, you can, but if it's not in your plan, it will cost a lot of money. As an alternative, however, something like CCH, again, we only looked at a little bit, or RIA, these are these other topical databases that used to be print loose leaves, still are, but most people use them online these days. They tend to be flat rate, as is Bloomberg. That's the one big advantage to Bloomberg. I know how much you all love Bloomberg, but the one advantage is once you've subscribed to Bloomberg, you've paid what you paid, and you can do as many searches as you want, as long as you want, and it doesn't cost any extra, and look at anything you want, unlike Lexis and Westlaw. So on our research strategy checklist, review again why secondary sources are so worthwhile in terms of the explanation leading us to primary authority, tips for using secondary sources. And I've said, given this tip in just about, I think, every single resource we've used, look at the table of contents to put it in context. Remember, you can do a search and your search terms can come up, but if it's in the wrong context, it's not going to help you. Look at the table of contents to see. Maybe your search terms didn't pull up the greatest section, but the greatest section is the next one down. And that's true really for, as I said, all the sources we've looked at. On Lexis and Westlaw, and Bloomberg, I think, but Lexis and Westlaw, I know for sure, if you're looking at a secondary source, whether it's a treatise, you can actually highlight, whether it's clicking on the checkbox or whatever the service provides, and you can just search a particular chapter. We didn't do that much. We did it once or twice in the beginning, but that's another tip. And remember to check for the publication information. Even on Lexis and Westlaw and Bloomberg, Not all treatises are updated constantly. Some just get updated, and Lexis and Westlaw put it there, and it's buyer beware. So maybe it wasn't updated since the treatise itself wasn't updated since 2010. That's now kind of old, so you want to find that out. So we've looked through our secondary sources, we've thought about our terminology, we've refined our search. Evaluate, stop and evaluate at various stages through the research process. Are the secondary sources helping? Did you classify the problem correctly? With our T problem, remember we talked about products liability and how this really isn't an issue yet because we don't have a product yet. What we're more concerned about is how our client can advertise and label her product. So think about whether you spotted that issue. Think about, again, state and federal issues. Think about statutes of limitations. We didn't talk about that a whole lot, but that's always something you want to remember. Do you need to revise your preliminary questions? The answer to that is, again, for any other than a simple issue, the answer to that is typically yes. Just as we learned about preemption, just as we learned about, well, maybe negligence is a possibility, just as we learned about, can we do anything under that section 1132? We know 1144 we might be preempted, but what about suing under section 1132? And then you have to research that. And we talked again kind of briefly about keeping a log. I'm sure you've noticed now, and that, believe me, it's not going to change. It's only going to get worse when you get out into wherever you're practicing. You're going to get interrupted. You're going to be starting or working on one project, and then someone's going to come and say, oh, we have this an emergency, and you'll get it pulled away for 2 weeks. But then you're going to have to go back after those 2 weeks to that first project. You don't want to have to start from scratch, right? You don't have a lot of time to waste. So try to keep a log. Remember, the history links on Lexis and Westlaw can help you with that. I gave you in the handouts a couple of suggestions on different ways of keeping research logs. Different people are going to have different styles. So here are a couple of samples, as well as a description from at least a legal research and writing text that some of you might have used in the first year. So keep that in mind. And remember too, again, just because your search terms appear somewhere doesn't mean that that is relevant. Admittedly, I removed us from reality in this course by saying, don't worry too much about relevance. Don't do that in the real world. That was for purposes of research only. And I always do that with a little bit of trepidation, but I'm always also not wanting us to get lost in arguing the merits of the case. This class is research. You get to do all the arguing the merits in most of your other, if not all of your other classes. But seriously, you need to take a look at and think critically about relevance. And yes, pulling up your search terms and pulling up a case with all your search terms is great. Make sure it actually applies. Okay. Of course, we then come to primary authority. And as I'm sure you remember, one of my favorite handouts is our sources chart. I still am convinced that if you understand what all of this is telling you, you are 60% the way there to understanding what you need to know about researching primary resources. So, of course, you want to take whatever references you get from the secondary sources. That's part of the reason you look at them, not the entire reason. But you also want to make sure to do an independent search for each of the 3 types of primary resources, for statutes, for cases, for regulations. As great as secondary sources are, they may not cover your entire issue. So you want to approach the primary sources a couple of different ways, so as hopefully to best ensure you don't miss something. Remember, our assignment issue, the Model T, actually had typically sent us to 2 different places in the statutes, especially. For federal, you found, I think it was Title 15 and Title 21, and for state, it was either the general business law or the agricultural markets. And You all found one of them. A few of you found both of them. And again, that to ensure that you see when an issue does cross over different areas of law, the best way to do that is different approaches. So secondary sources got you maybe to one, but a couple of different keyword searches hopefully would get you to the other. So again, take multiple approaches. So in statutes, follow up what you found in secondary sources and do an independent search. Of course, annotated code is our BFF, our best friend, so take advantage of the notes of decisions, take advantage of the references to other secondary sources. Make sure to check the table of contents. Again, in part for the context, very important with statutes and regulations. Some of you did a search on the assignment and you found your exact terms, but it applied to poultry or milk, I forget which isn't what we needed, because we needed to apply to a bottled beverage like tea, especially if it was poultry. That's totally, meat and poultry, totally not relevant, even though it had false advertising and whatever other of your search terms. So look at the table of contents for context. Look at the table of contents again to see if there are other sections that might be relevant or more relevant. I can't tell you, as I told you before, how many times I would do research looking for a statute on whatever, and my search terms would pull something up, and I'd say, all right, that looks like the title is about right, agricultural market, general business, and then I'd look at the section I got, and I was like, is that quite right? I'd look at the table of contents, and, oh, wait a minute, 3 up, that's the one I want. If needed, and only if needed, legislative history research, as I mentioned earlier, probably not going to do that frequently. Remember what the different documents are. If you understand that, I'm convinced that you will have a much easier time doing legislative history research. The resources are going to change over time. ProQuest is going to look different. What's available on Westlaw is going to look different. Even hopefully what's available for free online at GovInfo, at Congress.gov will improve, but that will change over time. Remember, the committee report is where you're going to get the best legislative intent information. Remember, the all-important public law number or chapter number is going to be the basis on how you find these different documents, and remember how to find them. And for state legislative history, Westlaw and the state's legislative website's probably going to be the best sources. And again, remember, especially with primary sources, update, update, and update. It doesn't have to necessarily, I'm not telling you have to spend hours at it. It's important enough for me to bang the table. It could be easy enough with statutes, just looking at the top on Lexis or going to the bottom and making sure Westlaw is up to date, making sure there's no notice or red flag telling you something's changed. It could be a 3-second operation, but it is critical. And again, on page 3 on the checklist, to talk about the table of contents again, it's worth re-emphasizing. Any questions so far? Okay, moving on to cases. Again, I strongly recommend, unless you know something about the area you're researching, not to start in cases. I know law students and attorneys, because you talk about cases for 3 years, you want to just dive into and find out what the cases say. I think that's not the best source. Yes, cases can refer you to statutes and can refer you to different arguments. I think you're much better off starting with secondary. Of course, you still have to do the case research, and secondary source, the annotated code, can help you do that, as we talked about, whether references in secondary. Remember to check those notes of decisions, as I mentioned, in your BFF best friend annotated code. And again, you want to follow up with a separate search. Google Scholar is a good place to look. Again, I wouldn't stop there. Google Scholar has some limitations. Many of you noticed, for instance, it doesn't go back very far in time for state materials. It does for federal, but for state cases, it varies all over the map, and I'm sure that will change over time too. But again, there can be a state case from, I told you the story of when I first started practicing, there was a state case from the late 1800s. That was the controlling case in the particular issue I had to research. Go figure. But once you get that good case from any of those other resources, you can use that to look at the topics and key numbers, as you did in our assignment 4. You can use the headnotes. You can shepherdize by headnote. You can use the key site by headnote. We'll pull up. So again, this isn't good law fuzzy, but it should show us some headnotes. And I should mention on Westlaw, when I asked you to find other cases using a headnote, many of you went into the topic list and looked at the key numbers, which was fine, but as I commented to you, to me that seemed like the more difficult way of doing it. You can also just click on the headnote link. All of these ways are good, and again, you want to do a separate keyword search because once again, all of these references will point you in one direction. You will want to do a separate keyword search to make sure there's not other aspects of the issue that you are missing. And I gave you several different tools for that. The synopsis and digest is one advanced type searching. Using the key number filter to help narrow down your keyword search. And again, don't forget to shepherdize, key site, update, and update. In some of your analyses in looking at cases and how to do case research, you neglected to mention that. Don't neglect to mention that, or do it, most importantly. And then finally, with regard to primary sources, administrative materials and regulations. Don't forget they exist. It's not something you've probably encountered in too many of your other courses up till now, maybe depending on what you've taken, of course. I know you have taken administrative law. Remember to research in that area. And with administrative law, all of the techniques I've just been talking about apply. Follow up from secondary sources, annotated code, but especially with regulations, look in that table of contents, because typically those references, whether from the annotated code, from the secondary source, they frequently will not get you to the best section. They might get you to the title. They might even get you to the part of the CFR. But that's really where the table of contents is going to help you out. And again, remember just to be aware of updating. It's really easy online. Again, 3 seconds might be all you need just to look and make sure that there hasn't been any change in the Federal Register, in the State Register. And remember to check for administrative decisions and guidance. They are hard to find. It's very hit or miss on Lexis and Westlaw. You can look at the Virginia site. You can do a web search. A lot of times, if you find guidance, especially from a particular agency that you're working with, that can help you a lot. What the guidance will tell you is this particular agency's interpretation. Here's how you want to deal with this particular issue. I mean, what could be better than that, right? You've got the agency tell you how to deal with it. The decisions also dealing with particular controversies. Basically, we talked about different ways of looking for those decisions and the guidance. But especially the guidance, can be very helpful. And then finally, we talked what I call one-stop research. Writing all this stuff together, right? Rather than having to go to all these separate places. So these databases that used to be loose leaves like RIA, like CCH, pull together primary sources, give you some explanation, give you some practice tools, include references to the regulations, to cases, to statutes, and frequently will link directly to them. Other types of practice materials like proof of facts, not so much a one-stop shopping, but giving you references to some of these other really useful resources like that proof of facts liability of HMO proof of facts article we found. Explain preemption to us, explain different theories of the case that we may or may not have thought of. Gave us interrogatories, gave us a checklist. Remember to do X 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Gave us forms, complaints, possible complaint forms. So all of these databases and practice materials can be really useful. I also highlight, remember, There are also separate sets, either online or in print, for forms, for court rules that you need to, and court rules, obviously, if you're in litigation, you need to be aware of. And as I have been mentioning throughout, research, sadly, is not a linear process. It's not you do step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hooray, we're done. You start not really having a great idea like we did with our liability of the HMO, and we came around and discovered preemption. All right, we had to investigate preemption. We discovered, oh, maybe we're going to get preempted. Well, what are other theories that might help our client? We came around, possibly negligence, possibly other theories of liability. So I think of research more as a spiral. And you have to keep on coming back. You might get into the primary source and realize, oh, I don't really understand that. I need to get more explanation out of the secondary source. And then you find primary sources and get as far as regulations, like, oh, wait, I don't understand that either. Maybe you need to go back out to secondary sources. Maybe you want to go out to secondary sources to find some practice materials to help you draft either a complaint or draft a document. But eventually you come around and you start to get a sense that you are covering all the areas that need to be addressed. Obviously, remember, once again, it's always important enough, remember to use Shepard's and Keysight, not only for cases, but Shepard's and Keysight can help you for statutes and regulations. They'll highlight for you, again, that 3-second updating. And you may even want to come back at the end to current awareness sources. We spent a little bit of time with BNA back in the beginning of the semester. These are newsletters that come out. They get updated weekly on the web, but sometimes they can even come out daily and can highlight for you, if you're following a particular area for a client or for your specialty, they can highlight for you cases that are either going to court or just got decided, to keep you aware of what's going on in that particular area. And also worthwhile to check at the end of the process. Has anything happened in the week or two since you started researching? Has anything happened maybe there, even within the last 5 or 6 months, that maybe whatever resources you were checking didn't incorporate yet? So current awareness sources, both good to keep you up to date generally, but also within the research process of a particular issue to make sure that you know what's been going on. And as we saw, sometimes may not be the best place to start, but as we saw, for instance, with the New York Law Journal, even an older article also gives us some good explanation. I've already mentioned this a bunch of times, updating, and updating. Use, of course, as I said, Shepard's Keysight, eSight. Remember eCFR? I happen to think that's probably the easiest way, just to make sure you've incorporated the most recent events that are in the Federal Register. Take advantage of Shepard's and Keysight not only for updating, but for research purposes. A lot of you decided that you really like the Keysight by HeadNote or the Shepardized by HeadNote. Great, use it. Take advantage. And as I started to allude to, as you go around this spiral, eventually you come more to the middle where you realize, I'm running into the same things over and over, and very important, they are addressing my issue. You can use the same search terms, and yes, eventually you start running into the same cases, the same statutes, but if your search terms are not the terms of art, they may be misleading you. So again, you need to think about whether or not just in my search terms coming up, am I using the right search terms? So when are you done? When you will never find every single relevant case. Hopefully you'll find all the relevant statutes and regulations, but you will never find every potential case that might be on point, at least for a complex issue. Certainly for simpler ones you might. So the signs, given that you can spend forever researching and you might find one more thing, and you don't have forever to research because you have to do other things in practice too, in fact a lot more than just research. So you want to, again, feel like you have answered the questions. And you do start to, it does become circular. And that kind of happened to us. Now granted, we haven't thoroughly researched our ERISA question by any means. We didn't look at Section 1132. We don't really have a sense of how that negligence might play out, but we have a start. Even preemption, we're still not quite sure if our client will be preempted, although it, at least to me, seems like it is probable. But we are starting to see the same things, and we need to sit down and read it. So we are starting to see the same statute sections, 1144, 1132, maybe Section 4404 in the New York statutes. We are certainly seeing the Aetna case, seeing a couple of that Rush Prudential case, which of course may or may not be a good law for our issue. We would have to determine that. Likewise, the CFR sections and the New York regulation sections. So you start to see the same. We've seen the amateur proof of facts. We've seen the ALR article. A couple of the treatises. The litigating tort, I think, was one of them that looked pretty useful. So you run across that a bunch of times. So having seen those repeatedly, we now need to dive in and look at them in depth. But that gives you a sense of when you can start, when your research process starts to wind down, and you can, and it is basically, you can finish with the research portion and start to analyze and do whatever writing that you need to do. So that was a quick explanation. Any questions? So a couple of online tips for research. Already talked about finding out what your contract is. Starting with Google's great, not stopping there. Remember, the free web can be very useful, may or may not be a good idea to use the free web in exclusion of Lexis and Westlaw, because Lexis and Westlaw, of course, have the updating capabilities, Shepherd, ICE, and Keysight, letting you know how your cases analyze other cases. Remember other databases that may not be as expensive. Already talked about CCH, RIA, Hein Online. We will look at a database called Fastcase later on tonight. Some librarian tips. Be curious about what you don't know. It's tempting and you're really busy and you got to get this done and you're under a deadline. It's like, I don't really get that. I don't have time. That may be the crux of the issue. It may not, but investigate it. Be curious. Be adaptable, whether it's with your terminology, or you all have had to be adaptable as you've looked at Bloomberg for the last assignment because they went and changed it on us in the middle of the semester. That's going to happen as you know with websites, they change what a website looks like and you have to figure it out all over again. Take advantage of training. Go to the help section of Bloomberg if it's really confusing you and you find wherever you work uses Bloomberg, and take a look at some of those web tutorials. That's what I'm going to do because I haven't really used the new Bloomberg very much. Get to know the resources in your organization, both the people resources as well as the technological and other resources. I am still totally convinced that people are smarter than Google. So take advantage, whether it's IT folks who can help you out, whether it's librarians, obviously I'm biased, and everybody else who might have some smarts to help you out. If you are working for a particular partner, supervisor, whatever your organization is, and you're working in a particular area of law, find out what their favorite treatises are. Certainly in a lot of the specialized areas, they tend to have their go-to treatise where if they don't know the answer to something, even though they've been practicing in it for 20 years, find out what that is. See if you can translate your skills, what's called scalability these days. If you found something works, like you really like key numbers and Westlaw, but you don't have Westlaw, see if there's some sort of topical arrangement for cases in whatever other resource you're working with. So Lexis, we saw headnotes. Bloomberg has sort of its headnotes, but see if you can translate those skills over. And finally, be nice to the folks who are trying to help you out, whether it's your humble librarian or the guy in a copy center. I can't tell you how many times something has gone terribly wrong, even in this day and age when you can scan everything, and I need the copies and I didn't plan ahead, or something went wrong, and if you've been nice to these people, they'll do you a little favor when you're in a bind. Likewise, the IT people. I can also tell you, as someone who's in the service industry, when attorneys come to us at the desk, if they seem nice to me, I'll go that extra mile and try to figure out. I think I told you about that New York regulation section that we figured out, and it had to go back and figure out when it was last updated, and it wasn't enforced when the client had the citation issued to him. On the other hand, when people are rude, I'll answer their questions, but I'm not that motivated to go beyond answering what they ask. And sorry, I'm human too. I know I should do my best for everybody, but we're all human, so keep that in mind. Questions? So this research strategy is an overall sort of, as I said, looking at the forest rather than focusing on the details. I call it a checklist because I also happen to think, in my humble opinion, that this will be a good checklist for you to use to make sure you understand what we've gone over throughout the semester. Also, to help you make sure that you cover what you need to in the exam. And so I'm now going to transition from our strategy to what the exam will be. So I am circulating now, and it is on the website, and I'll show you where in just a sec. These are the questions. This is almost, with one exception, which I'll explain, exactly what you will see on the day you choose to pick up the exam. So here on TWIN, on the course website, we now have a final exam section. And in that final exam section, you see the schedule, which we've already talked about. Again, you will come on either May 8th or May 9th at 9 a.m. to pick up the exam. And you will pick up the exam in room 102B. And this is all on the instructions on what I'm circulating now. What I am circulating now is what's on the website under final exam questions. So see the little hand pointing there. So you can download that and will want to, as I will explain in a moment. Excuse me. So, as you saw way back in the beginning of the semester, under the course requirements memo, the exam's worth 400 points. To earn all of those 400 points, you must answer all of the questions. Go through and be methodical. We will go through each and every question in the next however long it takes us. Figure out a way for you to make sure that you check and make sure you answer. It breaks my heart, and it happens every year, I hate to say, that somebody forgets a part of a question. I can't give you any credit if you forget a part of a question. If you put in something, I can usually give you at least some credit, even if it's not quite right. And that's part of why I think the research strategy checklist will be useful. Okay, as I said, you'll pick up the exam. Jackie Kassar is in 102B. When we're done with this conversation, we will take a field trip just before our break. We'll take a field trip down to 102B, so I can show you where that, just to make sure you know where that is. You may know already, but field trip won't kill you. If you have to leave before then, please make sure with me you know where that is, or just make sure you know where that is. Again, you will pick up the exam either on Monday the 8th or the 9th. It will be available as of 9 a.m. Please don't be late. I once had a student not pick it up till 11 and then didn't finish the exam because needed that extra couple of hours. On the first page, what I suggest you do is download the questions, and then you can either put your answers in, as you've done with the assignments, put your answers in those questions, or you can send me a separate document. Doesn't matter to me which. But on that first page of whatever you do, please make sure that you put your exam number. What is your exam number? Well, on this example, you see question number X. That X will be a number between 1 and 20. There are 20 of you. There will be 20 exams, numbers 1 through 20. So just put whatever your question number is on that. Put your exam number. That's whatever number you get assigned by the registrar's office. And advanced legal research. So, because what will happen is you will email your answers to the law exams, and if you have all of this information, they will know that that exam then gets forwarded to me. This is an anonymous exam, which is why you're using your exam number, so when I'm looking at it, I won't know whose is whose. Okay. So all your exams must be emailed by 5 p.m. to lawexams@hofstra.edu. And in addition to putting that information on the front page, please also include the course name, your exam number, and my last name in the subject line. Again, this helps the registrar get it to me most efficiently. I will also ask you, you are going to pick up the exam in 102B at 9 a.m. whichever day. I'm going to ask you to return that exam sheet at the end of the day by 5:15 in the book return slot. That will be the other spot on our field trip when we go down in the library in a little while. And I ask you to do that by 5:15. And what will happen that day, both days, and at 5:15 I will wander out of my office and check that book return slot and pick up all of whoever took the exam, all of your sheets. You should receive a once you've emailed your answers, you should receive a confirmation from Law Exams. Make sure you get that confirmation and keep it, just in case there are any transmission issues. Honestly, I haven't encountered any, but let's keep it that way. Before I go any further with that, make sure you back up and save. This I did encounter last year. One of the students, I don't know what happened on his laptop, but his exam disappeared. And this was, he was about to submit it. It was about 4:30, and yeah, nightmare. Yeah, I wanted to also. I felt so badly. So back up. However that works for you. I mean, you've written papers where you didn't want to lose them, and you know you're all on laptops there, and stuff can happen to your laptops. Whether you use a cloud service, do you all use Dropbox or Google Drive? That might be one way to do it. Or be careful if you're saving to another location, because you want to make sure to send me the complete and up-to-date exam and don't get confused between versions, because not with exams, but I've done that with other documents. But back up, at least save. I really don't know how he lost it, honestly, but my understanding is if you save the document, it frequently can be retrieved. He went to law IT, he went to university IT, and they couldn't, and the laptop was working, couldn't retrieve it off the laptop. So I don't know if it didn't get saved. I don't know that it didn't save it, in all honesty. But just take this story to heart. This is a real true story from last year.
We can back it up to a thumb drive if we want to, right? Cool.
Yeah, just, again, be very careful as you go through the day, if you're backing up, that you're always working from the most recent version, and you send me the most recent version. Whatever works for you. I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm just begging you to please do it so this doesn't happen to you. So, as it says here, parts 3 and 4 of these instructions. So, making sure the information's on your answers, making sure you email it to Law Exams, making sure it's in the subject line, and returning the sheet. Get you 5 points. I mean, how easy is that, right? You all know your names, and then you'll know your exam numbers, and drop off a sheet, and bingo, you're starting off with 5 points. Okay, so the substance of the exam. So this is a guided research journal. Your goal is, and I'm reading this intentionally, your goal is coherently explain your research strategy for the issue below. Right now you see a big blank space. That's the one difference that you will see when you pick up the exam on the 8th or the 9th. That will be a blank space, that will have an issue. Kind of like the issue I gave you on the assignment, kind of like the issue we discussed in class, the ERISA issue throughout the class. It won't be either of those though. So research strategy for the issue that you will read below. For more detail, the more detail, you provide for how to search the better. So I'm looking for good searches. So if we take our ERISA example, if you are doing a search for case law and you say case law on ERISA, that's not a good search because the terms case law are not going to be useful. So that's what I mean by how to search. I'm looking for, you're looking at statutes, regulations, you looked at the table of contents. You can use print, you can use just Lexis, you can use just Westlaw, you can use just Google, although I can tell you right now I will take points off because you won't be able to do other things that you need to do. But you can also use books if you want to use books. So if the research exists in both print or online, you can use either, as I just said. So also by detail and I'll go through the questions and you'll see better what I mean in a moment, but I want to see specific titles. And by specific titles, I don't mean just ALR, I mean the ALR that you are looking at. Like our ALR that we looked at ERISA was liability of third-party payors, that was it. And the citation was, I think, 56 ALR 5737, close enough. The point being, I want the title and I want the citation. Think about what you would want if you want to know, is this about my issue and how do I find it real quick? So give me that information. Give me the title of the treatise. Give me the title of the law review article and the citation. And here would be useful too for law review article. If it's from 1912, it's not going to be as relevant as if it's from 2012. Okay. Let me know what resources led you to the whatever it is you're citing. So for instance, if you start in the ALR and the ALR led us to 29 USC 1144, indicate that ALR led me to this statute section. So I am not testing issue spotting. As important as that is, again, my theory is that you've done that throughout law school. This is a research class, so I'm going to test research. So each fact pattern will have the necessary terminology that you need. It was kind of like our assignment. We went over it because I didn't want you to be misdirected and spin your wheels. As I mentioned, I will consider the quality of the searches. So for our ERISA problem, healthcare law isn't a great search if we're searching for statutes, but it's not a bad search if you're looking for treatises, right? So it's also contextual. Okay, you may not work together. This is one big difference from the assignment. This is individual, so basically no human contact. And by no human contact, you can't work together, you can't speak to me, you can't ask the reference librarian. Don't call Lexis or Westlaw. If you want to look at a tutorial on Lexis or Westlaw, that's fine, because that's not human, that's electronic. No social media, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is you're thinking of, smoke signals, I don't know. No human contact. This is an honor code issue. So do the work on your own. Okay. Yeah.
Is any part of the exam like having to do with the library? Do we need to be in the library and get the books? Like, is there physical?
You need to come in the library to pick up your questions. Yeah. You need to go to 102B, we'll show in a minute. After that, you can do the rest of it online. If you choose, you don't have to.
But you won't need to pull any books or anything.
You will not. Okay. I will be here both days of the exam. Do not talk to me. I can't put it that's actually the best way I've ever put that. Do not talk to me. Students have been tempted because they don't understand the question. I am spending as much time as we need today. I will be available from now until 5 p.m. the Sunday before, so that's the 7th. I will get back to you even on that weekend up until 5 p.m. that Sunday. Ask me as many questions as you need. Don't apologize. Please understand what it is I'm asking. I'm doing the best I can now to explain it. I will do the best I can to explain it to you as your questions come up. If people ask questions, what I will probably do is summarize them anonymously and send it to the class as a whole, so everybody has a sense of what folks have asked, because typically if one person's confused, another one might be. So don't ask me the day of the exam. The only thing I will deal with is some crazy exception, like your 4:30, your laptop has disappeared your exam, and then you have to figure out what to do about it. Very hopeful, and that was the one I've been teaching now here for like 13 years, and that was the one time speaking to me was the right thing to do. So hopefully you won't have a reason to speak to me those 2 days. Once you're done with the exam, then it's fine. So as I said, I'll be available until Sunday, the 7th at 5 p.m. Over the weekend, I won't be quite as responsive on email as I hopefully typically am, but I will get back to you. The only exception is, and this is TMI, sorry, next weekend my niece is getting married. So from Friday to Sunday, I'm not going to be looking at email because I have other things to do. So I'm sure you understand. But I'll be back that Monday and get back to you as soon as I can. Okay, let's dive into the questions. Let's go to the next page. So what you see on the next page, I'm sure some of you anyway have already seen, is 2 columns, secondary sources, Roman numeral 1, and primary sources, Roman numeral 2. They correspond to parts 1 and 2. So part 1, you are going to answer questions about your issue using secondary sources. There are 3 questions, and you're going to answer the questions for each of the 3 sources. So there's encyclopedias, and you get to choose whether you want whether you want to look at AMDR, CGS, or ALR. Only do one. Don't waste time doing all 3. But you will also want to look at law reviews, and you'll also want to look at treatises. So I'm asking you in part 1 to organize your answers by source type. So answer questions 1 through 3 for encyclopedias, then answer questions 1 through 3 for law reviews, then answer questions 1 through 3 for treatises. So again, look at all 3 types in column 1. So encyclopedias, law review, treatises, and for each of those, describe the following. What format did you choose? I'm guessing you'll probably choose Lexis or Westlaw, but if you use print or Bloomberg, that's fine too. For some of them, a website might be perfectly fine. Question? Yeah, absolutely. The only thing you can't use is another human. Okay, so let me know what you used. I used Lexis and Westlaw. I used Bloomberg, maybe. You don't have to. If you don't look at Bloomberg for the exam, that's totally fine. I'm not suggesting you don't. I'm just saying you don't need to. Let me know what the publication was. Now, obviously, for AMDR, CJS, I know you're looking at AMDR CJS, but the law reviews, I won't know what you're looking at. And treatise, obviously, you want to let me know what the publication is. Author, where applicable, not going to be applicable for AMDR, is going to be applicable for law reviews and possibly treatises. Date of publication. Date last updated. So again, treatises, obviously, a law review is going to have a date, so that's when it was last updated. And any filters that you use. So a lot of this is what you've been doing for the assignments all along. Question number 2, state in detail all of the steps you took. Make sure you include the most effective search terms or technique. I want you to tell me what you tried and then say, this was the most effective search. Whatever worked the best, obviously. And I asked you for pre and post search filters in question 1, and I'm asking you for your searches and all the steps in question 2. These questions 1, 2, and 3 are intentionally duplicative. I want to make sure you give me all of the information on how you found what you found. So if you feel, I just said that in question 1, say, see question 1, or copy and paste it in question 2, whatever makes you feel better. Just make sure you include all the information, how you found it, the searches you used. And question 3 gives the full citation information for the best title. So again, ALR, Don't tell me just ALR, tell me what the article in ALR was. Tell me what the citation is so I can type it into Westlaw or Lexis real quick and see if it's a good one. Which resources, services you used. Again, how did you get there? What was your search? Did you go to secondary sources and then search, or did you choose ALR and then search? Both ways are fine. Just tell me what you did. State the names and numbers of sections. That's going to be relevant for AmJur, right? Because AmJur has the title, so we didn't really find good AmJur, but say health law and then section 42. I'm making that up because that's not a real section in AmJur, but hopefully that gives you the idea. Or paragraph number, title, articles. Again, it depends on which resource give me the relevant information. So, for instance, our ERISA question. I might say, I searched Westlaw, I filtered initially for secondary sources, and I filtered for jurisdiction. And you will be given a specific state, and everybody will have a different state. And you'll read that in the issue on the first page, and on the second page you'll see it. You'll see the state abbreviation under the primary sources. So I filtered for, say, actually, no one will get New York, so I will just give that as an example. So I started secondary sources, and I filtered for New York, and I did my search liability HMO. I then, after my search, I narrowed to ALR, and I found 56 ALR, liability of third-party payor, and give the full citation. Same thing for law reviews. I searched secondary sources. I then afterwards filtered for law reviews, and I found, give the citation, how to sue an HMO. I'm making up that title. And treatises, same thing. So again, I want sources, I want the steps and searches, and I want your best results and how you got there. And again, it's okay to refer back. See question 2? Do not, however, just copy and paste your whole long results and expect me to find them. That's your job. So pull out the relevant resources. When in doubt, should I include it, shouldn't I include it? Include it. There's no word limit. So if you're not sure, should I put this information in? Should I leave it out? Put it in. But again, don't copy and paste. So that's part 1. Any questions?
We talk about most effective search terms. I've noticed a lot of my most effective searches had the same words because you keep it as broad as possible and then you narrow it with post-search filters. Is it okay if our most effective search terms end up being the same from question to question or part to part?
Yep. Okay. Most effective is most effective. Tell me what you did, but tell me most effective is I did this search and then I used search within results using these words.
Oh, okay, so you want like step. Okay. Thank you.
Questions? Part 2. Part 2 works pretty much the same way as part 1, except it's for primary sources. So, as I mentioned, you will look for codes, statutes, federal and state. You will have a state. I mentioned the state in the issue on the first page, and then you'll see the state abbreviation here instead of the question marks. So you want to look for statutes. You want to, of course, look for cases, judicial decisions, federal and state, regulations, federal and state, and administrative decisions or guidance, federal and state. And this is where the checklist is going to help you. Don't leave out the state. And the other thing I will say is, as an overall tip, before you take the exam, sit down and kind of plan out your time. Picking it up at 9, I'm going to spend this amount of time on part 1, this amount of time on part 2, this amount of time on part 3. Maybe you want to do 2.5 hours on part 1, 3.5 hours on part 2, and an hour on part 3. Obviously, you haven't seen the parts yet, so you don't know what they look like yet, but you'll see in a minute. This gives you a little time for lunch. I'm not telling you that's what you want to do, but I'm telling you discipline yourself, because I've seen exams where students spend 5 hours on part 1. And they don't have enough time for part 3. They rush through part 2 and don't have enough time for part 3. So give yourself a little bit of structure, and that will help you plan out the day. So having spent couple of hours on part 1, move on to part 2. Have your checklist to make sure you check federal and state for all of the primary sources. And again, please organize your answers by source type. So answer all the questions for federal codes, then state codes, then federal judicial decisions and state, federal regulations, state regulations, and federal admin decisions, guidance, and state. And I'm saying that explicitly, hopefully to be as clear as possible. Okay, so again, look at your issue for all of these sources and answer the following. So what title of resource did you look at? Obviously, codes. For federal, you're going to look at the U.S. Code Annotated or U.S. Code Service. Lexis or Westlaw. I'm happy to give you the answer for that already. And tell me where you look. Lexis, Westlaw. Obviously, you want to tell me the title of the resource for regulations. For federal, it's obviously going to be CFR. For state, it's going to be whatever your state administrative code is. Judicial decisions and admin decisions, they're not really, if they have a title, great, but don't stress if they don't. Obviously, judicial decisions, I don't need you to tell me I looked in the federal supplement. Just tell me I looked on Westlaw and I searched federal and state cases. Or Lexis, obviously, too. Tell me which format you use. If you use a website, give the web address. And again, whatever filters you use, pre and post search filters you use. So if you do a broad search and then narrow the search within, just tell me that's what you did and that's fine. And the date the resource was last updated where possible. So again, for statutes, that's going to be the date Lexis, Westlaw, or Bloomberg updates the code, not the date the section was last amended. Again, we looked at that last amended just so you could understand how to read that. It's the date a section was last amended typically isn't the most important piece of information for research. So again, the date Lexis or Westlaw last updated the code. State in detail all the steps you took to get to your results. Again, just how you got there. You've done that in pretty much all of the assignments. Make sure you include your most effective search terms, what worked to get you the best sections for each type of primary source. And again, however you get to that. Let me know if you used key numbers, indexes, table of contents, whatever filters, any combination. Remember, as we talked about with our research strategy, you want to use multiple approaches. And give the full citation information for the best statute section. So for instance, if you're citing to section 29 USC 1144, the title of that, you might remember, is Other Laws. That doesn't tell us very much. Most of the time, that section title does give some information about what that's about. I'll give just, it doesn't, and certainly I'm not worrying about Blue Book form. Citation to the judicial decisions, so just a name. If you want to abbreviate the names, that's fine. The citation, the year is important. Don't spend a lot of time reading the cases, just read the summary. If it sounds close, that's fine. Again, that's not true for real life, but it's fine for the exam. And again, remember, full citation information for the best regulation and administrative decisions for guidance. Include the dates the resources containing your sections were last updated and any updating information for your cases. What are you going to check for that? Updating information for your cases? Key site or Shepard's. One is fine. Just don't forget. Again, I can tell you from experience, that's one area where people forget and have to deduct. Don't forget. And if you don't find anything, just say, none. That way I know you checked. Okay, as it says here, where applicable, state the name of the section. Again, don't forget to do all of the different types of sources. I know I'm repeating myself an awful lot, but that's because I've seen mistakes that people make. So don't forget regulations, federal and state, administrative decisions and guidance, federal and state. Again, that's where I think a checklist, maybe make yourself a checklist and make sure before you send the exam that you've checked off all of the different sources. Okay, really important. All of the secondary sources for each of the categories under Part 1 for every issue that you're going to get, there will be secondary sources for each of those 3 categories. So there will be either AMJUR, CGS, or ALR. Again, don't do all 3, just do 1. There may not be for every single one of those, but at least for one of those. There will be law review articles, and there will be treatises. There isn't one right answer, so don't spend 5 hours thinking you have to find the right answer. Find one that sounds relevant. Okay? And in Part 2, for every single issue that you have, there will be federal and state code sections. You should find relevant federal and state code sections for every single issue, as well as a federal regulation. Expect to find federal and state code sections and a federal regulation. You may or may not find a relevant state regulation. If you don't panic. Just say none found. But you have to tell me none found, otherwise I don't know that you searched for it. Likewise, administrative decisions and guidance. Find something as close as you can, or if you don't think it's very close, say this is the closest I found, but I don't think it's very good. Same thing with state decisions, or state administrative decisions, you may not find anything. Say, this is what I searched and I didn't find anything. Again, make sure you tell me that, though, because if you don't tell me you searched and didn't find, I don't know that you searched. Obviously, I'll be with you in a sec. Obviously, judicial decisions, you will find some case. Again, don't spend a whole lot of time, or much time at all, worrying about relevance. Even if you say, this is the case closest case I found, I don't think it's very good. That's okay. Question?
So, for the last assignment, sometimes it would say admin decisions or guidance. Is that true for the final as well?
Yes.
If we can't find a decision, can we just go to guidance? Or
yes. Okay, again, tell me your searches, tell me what you found or didn't find. Question?
Thank you, I answered.
Question?
So if you didn't make a comment on any of our assignments or the level of detail we used or how relevant the source was, we assume that is sufficient for the final as well.
If it is in concert with what I'm saying today, then yes. Because I didn't hold your assignments to the same level that I'm going to hold the exam, because I didn't go over it to this extent. If I didn't indicate in a comment this is wrong, then yes, it's fine. But I didn't always ask for, I asked for your steps. I didn't always ask, for instance, for the date last updated. So to the extent I am asking what's in the exam, you need to provide what's in the exam. Does that answer your question? Okay. So this is the controlling authority. Question?
Are we supposed to email you or notify you whether we're picking up the exam on the 8th or the 9th?
No.
Or should just show up?
No, this is anonymous.
Okay.
You go to Jackie's office. I'll show you where that is in a little bit.
Okay.
Make sure to do it one of the days.
Okay.
But question?
You want the state description for state separate for description for federal. Like that's the same that there's a section there for different sources.
I'm not following your question.
Code, judicial decisions, regulations, and administrative decisions broken up twice by federal and state, federal and state, federal and state. Do you want the explanation for each one to be separate question for federal?
I want you to address both federal and state. If you use the same search, say same searches for federal. But I want it, you should, as I said, you should have answers. You should have code sections for both federal and state. You should find cases for both federal and state. You should find regulations for federal. You should also search for state. You may or may not find sections, but tell me that. and you should search for both admin decisions, federal and state, and tell me what you did or did not find.
I think kind of going off these questions, like in your assignments, you would say like we have federal and state in terms of like putting it in the same like answer, but separating in the paragraph or whatever. That's okay.
Yes. Okay. There we go. I'm going to do along those same lines, I'm going to do my best to find your answer and figure out what you mean. Organize it. I'm giving you a suggested organization. Organize it how it makes sense. If you want to put federal and state, that's okay. I'll figure that out as I did on the assignment. If you want to do a table, if a couple of you did that, that's fine. Bullet points are fine. Just make sure, again, you address. I am asking you to do each resource type individually because I found from past experience that students who did that were more organized and it was easier for me to figure out where their answers were. As I said, I'm going to do my best, but I have to be able to figure it out. And if it starts to get too jumbled together and I can't figure it out, that becomes a problem. Question? No? Please, if you can, if you have time, please spell check and grammar check. I mean, I'm not going to take off if you have a typo or anything, but at some point, if I can't understand the sentence you're writing, again, then I can't figure out what your answer is. So I said, bullet points are okay. However, texting shorthand is not okay. If I have to look up your abbreviation, then again, it's going to give me more difficulty to figure out what you're saying. And as I've already said, and I'll say it a couple more times probably, when in doubt, include it. I'm not sure if I should include it. I said no word limits for any parts of any of the questions. But again, please don't copy and paste. Moving on to part B, 2B. 2B, not 2B. Legislative history. I'm going to ask you to fill in the chart, which should look very familiar. You're going to look at ProQuest, and you're going to look at Westlaw. For ProQuest, please, again, don't copy and paste the whole entry. Fill in the different document types. Again, if you understand what the document types are and their abbreviations, this should actually be pretty easy. We've done this twice already for the workshop and for the assignment. If, for whatever reason, you don't find it easy, come and ask me beforehand and get clarification. So I'll ask you to fill in the chart on page 4. And you'll see for the right now, there are 4 question marks, though that will be a year. Amending legislation, just as you had in the assignment where I directed you to a particular year's amendment, I will direct you to a particular year's amendment for your issue for the statutory code that you should find. Also, I'm going to ask you to look at your state code section and just tell me what the session law citation number in here is. You'll see on page 4, I put that right on top. Again, please don't forget that. I've found that in the past that students have forgotten it, so that's why I put it up top in the hopes that you'll see that. Okay. Part B is, Part B is worth less than Part A, so I know legislative history can be a little more challenging. Don't spend too much time in it. Sink too much time in it so that you neglect Part 3. Question?
I know that like I understood the professional in the past, so for instance, what happens when you design them like logging on.
Well, first I would say if you're planning on taking the exam, wherever you're planning on taking the exam, make sure you can get into ProQuest for it. Make sure you just remember the steps. I would say try the Westlaw part or coming back to it if you still can't. let me know and I'll have to decide how to deal with that. I mean, don't let me know during the exam, but on your exam, could not get into ProQuest.
Should we try like a school computer as well?
If you're here. Other questions? Again, for legislative history, if you understand what those different document types are, other thing I should highlight, you will not find answers for every single document type. So for instance, there may or may not be conference reports for everybody's different issue. If you find none, write none. That might be the right answer. Everybody remember what hearings are called on Westlaw? Testimony, excellent, well done. Everybody remember what congressional record is called on, I think it's ProQuest? Congressional records equals, or record equals debates. Keep those in mind. For the presidential signing statement, when I say cite to source, be with you in a sec, whatever resource you find, there will be a citation. It will probably either be to UScan or to some compilation of presidential documents. Whatever it is you find, just give me that citation. Question?
What was you just said something about a report.
A report is not a debate.
Oh, no. Oh.
Congressional record equals debates. That was our formula, one mathematical formula for the semester, roughly. Okay, remember conference reports are a little tricky to find on ProQuest. You have to go down to the last report and click on it and see if it says conference. And obviously, if you remember how to find the public law number, Westlaw is still up. So remember how to find the all-important public law number, and you'll want to fill that in the chart. And when you look at that, that should give you the name of the act, and you will already have the USCA section number, because that's going to be your answer from part 2. And of course, the all-important public law number is going to be in the credits here on Westlaw, the history on Lexis, and I will give you the year, and then you will find, so if I give you 1996, you will know that the all-important public law number is 104-191. And clicking on that will give you, if there's any name, so the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, and legislative history is there. So I just gave you the answer. And again, remember how to find that state information, the public act, chapter, whatever the state calls it. Every state's different. Any questions? Part 3. Part 3 is the analysis question, just as you've been doing throughout on the assignments, typically the last question of the assignment, always. So I'm going to ask you to make recommendations as to how to research this issue. Question?
Sorry, just for part 3, is that still in the chart for the year amending legislation for your best federal statutory code section? Are we supposed to figure out, like, how do we know what to figure out that section? Or, like,
Well,
we're just kind of like one for the year that has.
you're going to find a section of federal statute section that should pretty clearly address your issue, and then you'll find the year in the credits. So if you want to, when you find your section, look to see if the year that's listed here is in your section. That would be a good way to double check. Question?
And then as far as like state law is concerned, it ends basically right there for us, and then the rest will be federal, right?
Correct. Questions? Analysis. Part 3. Are we ready? So your recommendation for your managing partner to use. Justify your recommendations by explaining why you are directing them. So why is it useful to the particular? Make sure you give specific recommendations. Do not just describe generic research techniques. Your partner received an A+ in advanced legal research, so she do not insult her intelligence. And what do I mean by that? I mean, give specific. I suggest you start using secondary sources. If you search liability HMO, you will find a great ALR article, liability of third party payor, 56 ALR 737. From there, the reason that's so great is that gives you a reference and explains preemption. So that's going to refer you to a very important statute section, 29 USCA 1144. Another good secondary source to help explain all this is Litigating Tort Claims in the treatise by whomever. I don't remember the title. And that's really good because that it gives you some strategies. Or maybe the Amjur Proof of Facts gives you strategies and some ideas for different theories of liability for the HMO. And liability, I forget the exact title of the Proof of Facts, but Amjur Proof of Facts, I think it's 66 POF 1/3 or something like that. Do not explain why secondary sources are good because they give you terminology and references to primary sources. I and your managing partner already know that. Give specifics. Make sure to specify any useful secondary sources identified. I already talked about that. And critical primary sources. I already started to talk about that. Make sure to reference not only statutes but regulations. Please don't forget regulations. They're very important too. You might say there are no real good administrative decisions on this, or you might say there are good administrative decisions on this. On the other end of the spectrum, just don't list citations. Say, go here and give lists of citations. Explain why they're good. ALR is good because it gives you the reference, because it explains. Maybe you want to give, here's a good way to research cases, and here's a good key number. Don't explain what a key number is. But give a good key number, say this will give you good references to good other cases. Or Shepardized by headnote was really great for in this case, for this particular headnote. Give a strategy again, where to start, wherever you think is a good starting place. If Google's a good starting place, that's good too. Again, don't stop there. But say, hey, Google this and you will find. The way I think, I would do this in a step-by-step. Step 1, check here, this is good because this makes me good explanation on preemption, and this gives me the reference to an important statutory section, 29 USC. Step number 2, this other secondary source, Proof of Facts, was good because it gave me these other aspects. It gave me good suggestions if we have to litigate for interrogatories. It gave me explanations on theories of liability. Step 2, look at the statute. Make sure you check notes of decisions. You may or may not find anything good there, but you want to check notes of decisions. Obviously, you want to look at both federal and state. All of these issues will have federal and state components. Like I said, it's going to have a state statute section as well as federal, just as the one in class, the example in class we did, just as the your assignment hypothetical did. Okay, so give a strategy where to start. Searches. Say what searches to use. It could be as simple as liability HMO is a great search. Use that. That's okay. Or if you had different searches, you found it didn't really work for state, but if we did denial of care, that works. Put that in. Don't assume, don't ask me to look back to parts 1 and 2. Spell it out in part 3. You must give a strategy where to start, secondary sources, primary sources that should be consulted, again, including regulations, step-by-step, strongly recommended. Your partner will see only part 3. So you must identify each of your steps, searches, and resources in your answer to part 3, what I just said. Okay, also remember if you're checking table of contents, not if, when you check table of contents, remember to mention Shepardizing. Remember table of contents for statutes and regulations, Shepardizing, obviously, or key citing for cases. Again, if key numbers are useful, which key numbers? If they're not useful, you don't have to mention it. Why I should use whatever secondary source you're using, I gave you an example of that already. So, Jillian, you asked a great question about my comments in the assignments. Look, to the extent that I did comment, and I did try to comment most of the time in your assignments, see where I indicated, especially if not enough detail or indicated what a good observation was. So you have an example to go by for the exam. Again, don't tell me that you like it. No offense, but that's not what your client's going to care about. Don't tell me that you like or that it's familiar. Tell me why it's a good resource, because it's well organized, because it provides useful references, because it provides practitioner materials that might be useful. The table of contents was useful. In question 3, don't spend any time talking about what didn't work. Just talk about what are good resources, good searches. The good sections that are statutory sections, any cases. Obviously, talk about researching cases. If there are good cases, mention it. Again, remember to Shepardize your key site. One other way to think about this, although it's not stated in the question, but you can think about it this way, is if you had to go back to this 5 years from now, what would you want to know? You'd want to know good resources, right? But you'd want to know why. You'd want to know what the statute sections are, but you'd want to know good searches because the law could change in 5 years. And again, I've said this a bunch of times, no word limits. So there's good news. Question?
If let's say you use like one source for the entire fundamental law in this particular section, do you want us to give you like analogous like tools and like tools and Lexis and Google they have it just to show?
No. If you found good strategy, soup to nuts in Westlaw, from secondary to state admin guidance in Westlaw, then that's fine. Other questions? Okay, some other hints. So as I mentioned, time, this originally was actually a 4-hour thing, but the students who took it, some anyway, struggled with the 4 hours, so that's why I made it an 8-hour exam. So budget your time, but you shouldn't have trouble finishing it in 8 hours if you are careful and not fall in the trap of spending the first 5 hours on part 1. Again, create a checklist just to make sure you cover everything that needs to be covered. Ask questions. As I said, I'll respond, unless it's a personal question, I'll respond to everybody, or I'll give the question and answer to everybody, as I've done actually on the website for assignments. And I'll probably also put it up on the website so you can review as you're reviewing for the exam. The exam template, as I showed you, is already there. Again, when in doubt, include the information. Remember to use the table of contents and use an index if that's useful too. Again, if you are getting references from other sources and that's how you found a statutory section, a regulatory section, tell me that, but also do an independent search. And that's true not just for the exam, but when you want to do it for the exam, that's true in what I'm calling real life. We will go down in just a minute or two, and I'll show you where 102B is and the book return slot is. Study suggestions, try doing the exam with the assignment question. And only to make sure that I don't forget, our next class will be a review of the different aspects of the different types of resources, but we will do it in a Jeopardy game format. So hopefully it will be a little bit of fun, and I will ask you to bring your own beverage, and I'll bring lunches. And I'll remind you again at the end of class. Any questions? Okay. Let's go take an exam. We'll now dive into a serious, but a little lighter fare. Before we do that, though, I realize I was thinking about some of the questions in the discussion. You don't have to stick with just one service on the exam. If you want to Google in the beginning, or you want to use the Virginia website for administrative decisions, because honestly, that's pretty easy. That's fine. Just tell me that's what you did. So there's no, if you find you like Shepherd's better for cases, but you really like Westlaw better for everything else, that's okay too. So whatever works. Okay, so let's now move on to some other web-based and other database research that might be interesting to know about. We can't use all of them that I'm going to show you, because unfortunately we don't have subscription, and one example of that is Ravel, or Ravel, I don't know even how they pronounce it. Ravel is a new type of legal research database, in that rather than relying on strictly keyword searching or plain language searching, they do what's called relational searching. So you get these funky, the demonstrations I've seen, you get these funky results. So you see how cases relate to other, and this is supposed to be more of an AI, artificial intelligence approach to legal research. And I will confess to you that I don't know a great deal about it, because I've only seen it demonstrated a couple of times. And again, it is a subscription database. I believe it is a flat rate subscription database. So if you did have access, you could play with it and figure it out. But if I did have access, I would explore it, maybe look at some of the tutorials and read more about it. I did want to highlight it for you, because this AI relational aspect is getting more and more interest in terms of how databases, and specifically legal research databases, are evolving. Which brings me to FastCase. FastCase is a basically less expensive alternative to Lexis and Westlaw. And we just recently subscribed to FastCase, and the reason we recently subscribed to FastCase is that if you decide you want to become a member of the New York State Bar Association, I don't know if that's true for Massachusetts or for New Jersey, for those of you going, or California, but for those going elsewhere. But it's true for quite a number of states. Actually, one of the handouts lists the Bar Association subscribers. If you are members of any of these bar associations, New York, you will have some access to FastCase. It won't be totally unlimited, and their website and the handout explains what it includes. It includes basically that state, your state's materials, and I think federal, but don't even quote me on that. The point being that Bar Association membership, especially for new graduates, is not a lot of money, so this is a way to get access to more sophisticated online legal research than you have through Google or other free websites. And actually, as you see from one of the handouts, as a law student, you can join the New York State Bar Association for free. I don't know how long that lasts after you graduate, but if you join now, you might have access to their resources and FastCase for possibly as much as a year. Don't quote me on that. But I highly recommend you, at least for those of you staying in New York, that you look into that. So here's what FastCase looks like, and as you can see, it's not nearly as robust as Lexis and Westlaw, but many of you expressed interest in how do I search if I don't have access to super expensive stuff. This is one possible answer in addition to the free sources that we've talked about. And it's mostly primary sources, although there are some secondary sources, as we see down here. And again, we talked about exploring new resources, so I would look at the help. I would take a look at tutorials, FAQs, user guides. They even have, again, live help. And then I would take a look at what their advanced search looks like. And I like to do that because it just sort of breaks down for me what they have available. So I learn, for instance, what their search syntax is and what are the different connectors they use. Actually, the advanced search is also where I would go to limit by jurisdiction. So you can see I already plugged in a jurisdiction limit, which FastCase apparently saves for me. You can access FastCase. I forgot to mention through the library homepage, in the typical way we access different databases. So you can either search here and you would see, so if I search for Fastcase, you get Fastcase and just click there, and that would bring you to what we were already looking at. So if I did our favorite search, basically would see the list. I mean, you know what search results look for. And some interesting, and then I would just explore the features. In Fastcase, like Bloomberg, is flat rate, so once you subscribe, either through the New York State Bar Association or whatever organization. So here's an interactive timeline. We just, again, the library just subscribed to Fastcase a couple of weeks ago, so I haven't had much time to get to know it. This is a little bit of what some of that relational aspect. So you can see these big circles refer to basically cases that are cited to and how much. But I would, if you become a Fastcase user as a low-cost alternative, I would recommend, again, investigating their tutorials. We talked a little bit, talked a lot about when doing free web search, now moving away from Fastcase and Bravo to free web search, we talked about evaluating websites. And in our research strategy, I talked about make sure when you're looking, do a Google search, think about where the web source is coming from. Is it a law firm that's trying to find clients? Is it just a random website? I like to joke, Lisa's Bar and Grill and website. I could put up anything I want and change all the words. There is a nice, and this link is on the course homepage, is actually a checklist. If, for those of you who want to be a little more scientific than just sort of figuring out where the website comes from and making a judgment, there's an actual checklist here through I guess that's University of Maryland, I think, that gives you a little more structure and detail. You can have check boxes if that were something that you felt was worthwhile. So we've all talked about Google and how great Google is and how you should start with Google, but not stop there. There are actually other search engines out there. Not too many people use them, but some of them might actually be worth knowing about depending upon what you need to do. And believe it or not, one useful place to find out about them is good old Wikipedia. I searched Wikipedia for search engines, and you get, I just happen to like this list because it gives you specialized search engines by different topics, different aspects. People search engines, we talked a little bit about fact finding before break. I showed you a couple of those databases, People, PIPL, and so you'd find some references to those here. Search engines on topics, so further up here, so business, computers, education, food, always an important subject, and lots of other types of search engines. There's one for medical, so perhaps more relevant from a legal research standpoint. If you are in the MedMal area, you might want to know about the medical search engine, and here's a whole list of them. Maybe you've heard of WebMD. As you've Googled whatever medical question you've had, you've probably come up with WebMD results. I know I have. And so you can see an example of that listed there. Something very different. I don't know that you would ever use it. I honestly just think it's kind of cool. I've never actually used a computational search engine. Again, companies that are exploring alternatives to Google, and so you could see something a little more mathematically oriented. So if you search Wolfram Alpha about lawyers, we get all sorts of statistical and numerical information. And obviously, if we search Google for lawyers, we get a lot different results. And finally, and actually this is probably about the most useful of the different types of search engines I will tell you about. And it's a search engine called DuckDuckGo. Gotta love the And the reason you might want to use DuckDuckGo is that it doesn't track you. There's been a lot about privacy lately in the news because I guess the regulations have changed, I think it is. So now your internet service provider, Verizon, Comcast, cable, whomever it is, no longer is prohibited on collecting data about what you do online. Obviously, it knows all that because you're getting your internet through them, and they can sell that data. And maybe that troubles you, maybe it doesn't. So if you don't, now this doesn't address that because it's still your internet service provider that you're going through DuckDuckGo, but this at least stops your search engine from tracking you. Google will actually track your searches. Now that might be a good thing because Google might remember your searches and you may love that. Or it may kind of creep you out a little bit like, really, they're remembering everything I search? Question?
And this is going to be a bit random, but yeah, 60 Minutes had a really good special on third-party web tracking and the companies that are usually involved in it. You can also install an app on your, or an extension on your current web browser like Disconnect to disable third-party web tracking as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot of interest, and there are a lot of different ways, absolutely. There's a lot of interest since that change in the regulations, interest in the third-party apps, interest in VPNs, and getting off subject, a virtual private network. That's one way of avoiding the internet service provider problem. So for instance, I go through Cablevision. If I don't want Cablevision knowing what I'm doing, I can subscribe to a VPN, and then once I enable the VPN, I then go through the VPN rather than Cablevision. And the VPN typically, their business plan is they don't track what you're doing. And I'm not suggesting that you need to do this or should do this, but if it is something that is a concern of yours and you either want to install the browser extension or you can search through DuckDuckGo and it will not. So you can say we don't store your personal info, we don't follow you with ads, we don't track you ever. So throw it out there for your interest or not as you see fit. So I mentioned Google does track you. So one thing I do suggest you do at some point, if you ever have some free time, which I know is very rare, check out what Google does. I think Google is great, and I'm not trying to convince you to go either way. Just know what you're doing. So read Google's privacy policy in terms of service and understand how they are or are not tracking you. For instance, the Chrome browser, if you are signed in, will track your searches. Again, you may think that's great because it helps you keep track. I don't necessarily want certainly my personal things to be tracked, so I tend to use Firefox and use the do not track, so at least my searches aren't tracked. And the problem with that is I have to keep up with how Firefox changes that. So understand what Google's policies are, Google privacy policies, and read about it. So we talked a little bit about advanced Google searching. So once you've decided where your comfort level is with Google and set it up accordingly, and you can actually tell Google, don't remember my searches. So it's another thing you might want to investigate as well through that privacy policy. We have already actually looked at one advanced Google feature. If you can Google advanced Google search and you come to this page. So what we talked about numerous times was the site search. So if you have a website, you can actually tell Google search this site by typing SITE in front of the web address, and then after the web address, a space whatever your search terms are. Or you can go to this template and do it here, but there are other things that you can search by. So for instance, file type. If you want to find something that's just PDF, I know that's popular for while you are on journals, or you want to find a PowerPoint presentation, you can actually search Google and tell it find file type and choose whatever file type you want. So you can see PDF, and somewhere in here there's PowerPoint, there's Excel, for whatever reason, if you just want to find an Excel spreadsheet on something. And so you tell Google which file type, and then you search for the words. Google has an pretty good and help center. So if you go to, again, you can search Google Help, and this is different ways of taking advantage of Google. And obviously Google's always doing something new, so it's changing. So if you want to learn some of the other tips and tricks that you can do, and again, that's changing pretty frequently, you can go to the Google Help Center. There's lots of, I'm sure you've explored a number of these in terms of other advanced Google type searches. This is the latest thing to compete with Siri and the Amazon Echo. So Google has its own product, and now it's also got its assistant. There are some interesting other products. One I will highlight for you. One of my criticisms of Google is it's like a little kid, and after the toy isn't new anymore, it gets bored with it and it doesn't look at it anymore, even if it's a really good toy. And one of those features on Google is Google Alerts, and this was a new Google feature, I don't know, maybe in ancient history 5 or 6 years ago, ancient for Google anyway. You can just like you can set up alerts on Lexis and Westlaw, you can tell Lexis or Westlaw, hey, search this for me and give me the results when anything new comes along, and whatever your topic is, you can do that on Google. And I've done that for a bunch of different things, whether it's for legal research, so it does a Google search, so I can see, for a while I was tracking what's new in the area of pet custody. I also, there are other interesting non-legal things you can track, obviously. But these days, you can't even find Google Alerts on the products page because it's no longer the new toy, but it still exists. So you have to Google Alerts, and then you can find out. And basically, you use it's your Google account, which is your Gmail account, and you can set up so you can see my different Google searches or Google Alerts. And what will happen is periodically, and you can set up the time, I get Google Alerts when something new comes up on any of these particular searches. Questions? So have any of you heard of the Wayback Machine? I see some. So, you know I like cartoons, so bear with me for a minute or two here. I'll introduce you to where the Wayback Machine got its name. This is a cartoon from Mr. Peabody and Sherman, was shown with Rocky and Bullwinkle, and many of you probably haven't heard about this, but this was a cartoon shown way back in the 60s, I think, and maybe even before. So here's where the Wayback Machine gets its name. Yeah, it helped if I had sound. So I won't spend too much. Oh, that's why I don't have sound. Fingers crossed.
Good morning, Sherman.
Sure, the banks of the Nile.
Oh, well, I guess they do. At any rate, that's where we're going today.
Where?
To the banks of the Nile.
To deposit money?
No, to meet Egypt's most famous and beautiful queen, Cleopatra. I instructed Sherman to send the Wayback controls from the year 42 BC.
That's the
And
Wayback
place,
Machine.
Cleopatra's royal palace. Unfortunately, when we arrived, we found the queen in the midst of having...
So they traveled back in the Wayback Machine. That's Mr. Peabody is the dog and his boy Sherman. So, they're doing a little joke on, we have our dogs while Mr. Peabody has his boy. So they get in the Wayback Machine, and there are all sorts of silly cartoons you can YouTube about different places they go. And the stories are a little, well, more than a little satirical. It's kind of fun if you have a certain sense of humor. Anyway, that's where the Wayback Machine gets its name. Why am I making such a fuss over a Wayback Machine? The reason is there is something on the internet called the Wayback Machine, otherwise known as the Internet Archive. Whoever named it obviously liked this particular cartoon, and what it does is it allows you to find pages that are no longer available on the internet. You need to have the web address. So I just literally used the Wayback Machine yesterday to help find the history of our very own law school, because I was was trying to find some information that was listed on the website back in the early, well, actually not even early 2000s, like 2010. Obviously, our website gets updated every year, if not more frequently, and changing names and the staff changes and all sorts of things change. But if you want to find out, as we all now rely on, well, go to the website to find that out. Well, what happens when they update it? Then you no longer have that history. The way in the old days you used to have a catalog and used to have people directories and libraries would keep those. Well, we don't have those anymore because they're not published. So one way to find something on the internet that's not there anymore is the Wayback Machine. And as I said, I use this now and again, and it's tremendously useful. Hey, don't do that. It is tremendously useful when you can get to it, obviously. So, what the heck do I need to be? So let's reload it. Am I connected? Bummer. All right, I don't know why that didn't go through, but it finally did go through. So what this is showing me is, so what the Wayback Machine does, what the Internet Archive does, is it goes and it takes snapshots of web pages all over the web, and it stores them. And so apparently the Wayback Machine stored law.hofstra.edu going as far back as 2003. It only took a couple of snapshots, and you can see as time moved forward, it took more snapshots. So if we were to look at 2009, February 5th, just randomly, you may or may not get there, redirect. So eventually it redirects. So this is what the website looked like in 2009. And you can then actually click on the links and it brings you to the website as it looked at that time. So I was able to go back and get information from 2009 that we no longer have a record of today. Obviously, it's true not just for Hofstra, but you won't get to every single website, and you have to be a little creative with using the web address. So sometimes you have to go back to the root, so law.hofstra.edu. Sometimes I can go further in if I want to use a /directory. So again, you have to be a little flexible and creative, but it's really tremendously useful if you're running across something where a website no longer exists, or again, the website's updated and you need older information. You'll always find what you're looking for, but can be useful. And as I said, they called it the Wayback Machine after the cartoon I showed you, but it's also known as the Internet Archive for probably obvious reasons. And the last thing I thought I'd finish up with is just talking about some that they're called productivity apps or features. We already talked about, who uses Dropbox? Hey, Dropbox. Google Drive? Anybody use other cloud storage? There are all a bunch out there.
I still use thumb drives.
Thumb drives are okay till they stop working or you lose it.
Mine's loyal. It still works.
Well, okay. They actually do have a lifespan. I mean, they could work forever or they could stop working. Not that I wanted to, but you want to be careful with cloud storage. I don't put my tax returns on Dropbox for sure. If I'm going to travel around with that, I do use a thumb drive. But on the other hand, for instance, all my class materials are on my Dropbox, so this way I can look at it at home and I don't have to bring home my laptop. Calendar, use Google Calendar or other calendaring. Let's see. Yeah, I can get to my Google Calendar from here. It's not going to be very exciting because I don't use this one as much. But there's Calendar. But a great way to, you can share the calendar. So, in a professional context, you could set up meetings this way. Anybody use Doodle to set up appointments? Doodle poll? Which I don't even know the address. Which I find Doodle's used a lot professionally just to set up meetings. So I belong to a professional organization, and we're all over the tri-state, well, actually the New York City area. And if we need to meet, the president sets up a doodle poll and basically lists the dates, and we choose the dates, and then she can figure out when we're available. And then finally, back to good old Google. We were looking at the calendar as one of the features. And again, I'm just going to the different products here. Who uses Google Drive? So also a good storage. You use it for, what do you use Google Drive for?
To share documents with persons.
Share documents, anything else?
I use it as
So yeah, as a backup, as I was saying, Google Drive. So I'm just going to a folder here. You can also put together forms. So I was showing you Doodle as one place to have a sort of poll. Doodle as a poll, so you can just give people choices, but you can create a Google form. You can do all sorts of things with the form, not just this was a review for a workshop, but this was through Google. It's called Google Forms. Google has its own spreadsheet app called Google Sheets. I'm getting too far back here, so let's go back to Drive. So we're talking about Google Docs for backup, or did you know you can also do real-time editing on Google Docs? It's kind of neat. You can watch as people are typing. You could be in California, New York. Google Sheets, Google Slides, I've honestly never used, but it's their PowerPoint equivalent. And again, for now anyway, this is all free, which is a big advantage. Told you about forms, Google Drawings, I don't know much about, and you all, I'm sure, know about Google Maps. So just some other useful, not really research, admittedly, but useful tools that might be of interest. Any questions? Okay, so I'm sure you've all had enough hearing me talk, so I will just remind you, next week we will have our legal research-like or Jeopardy-like team competition where I'll have legal research questions for you. I will remind you by email, but I'll tell you now, bring your own beverage, and I will bring munchies. And please, 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 if you've got questions of the exam, I know you're not going to think about it now, but as we get closer, please don't hesitate to ask. Also, I hope to have your assignment 5 back to you by next Tuesday, so that you can look at it. And again, now that we've talked about the exam, if you have any questions regarding what you see in your assignment 5, I specifically designed that last question where I asked you for your research strategy to be quite similar to the part 3 question. So as I review your assignment 5, I will be reviewing that with having the exam in mind to give you tips on what you might want to do the same or different.